You know, one of the things that we often hear about from the anti-gun Nazis is this idea that the Second Amendment only applies to white people. Doctrines like stand your ground, no duty to flee, and the castle doctrine are for whites and definitely not for blacks. However, we have a story out of Houston today where an elderly grandmother was confronted at her food truck, her place of business, with an armed robber who pulled a gun with the intention to shoot and kill her, and she was able to defend herself with a firearm, again, a grandmother against a 23-year-old, thus saving her life. And this is one of those stories that is absolutely crazy when you think about it, because only a couple of circumstances and some twists of fate are the reason why this is a good defensive use of firearm story, and not the story of somebody being murdered over $40. But before we get into that, I just want to say I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, April 15th. I've told you about it before. It's for the Minds Fest. I'm not speaking at the event, but I'll be in and around there. So if you want to get tickets and you spot me, you can meet me. We can hang out. There's going to be a bunch of speakers there and all of that. It's also being done at the comedy club that Joe Rogan tends to perform at now that he's moved to Austin. So maybe, hopefully, he'll make an appearance and you might get to meet him. I'm hoping to meet him. But yeah, April 15th, link in the description for tickets.
A food truck owner shot an armed man who tried to rob the business during the lunch hour in Southwest Houston. No one's in custody, and police are calling it a self-defense shooting.
So first and foremost, this robbery actually took place at the beginning of the lunch hour, meaning that the robber involved in the scenario, not exactly the smartest individual that you can have, as typically this type of food truck really hits it big during the lunch hour, so a robbery post-lunch would obviously be more fruitful, and that is told to us by the local news when they share that they only had $40 in the register because that's all they made that day, and that's what this guy was trying to steal.
Eric, I just spoke to the shooter's son. He says this is devastating to his family. He's very fortunate. He feels very fortunate that his mother and his uncle are still alive. They were the ones inside of this food truck. All of this happened today, and they had only made $40.
They open this because the mom knows how to cook, and they just trying to make an honest living. You know, everybody ain't trying to make an honest living. These are trying to make an honest living.
The Elite Eats food truck had only been open an hour today.
So first and foremost, the local news did an absolutely terrible job of advertising this particular food truck. It's actually called Elite Eats and Cold Treats. So if you guys are out in the Houston area and you want to patronize this business, that is the actual name of the food truck. It is findable on Google, so you can find the location of it. It's typically parked in the same area, so if you want to support a business where a grandmother used Second Amendment protections to defend her life from a 23-year-old armed robber, that is the name that you should actually go and find. So yeah, first and foremost, just not even giving them the appropriate advertising, totally not cool by the local news.
They open this because the mom knows how to cook, and they just trying to make an honest living. You know, everybody ain't trying to make an honest living. These are trying to make an honest living.
Secondly, I do appreciate these people, and these are family, and I believe some of them are friends of the owner or people who work in the business together, saying that these are people who are trying to make an honest living. They're trying to do the right thing, even in Houston, as crime is getting out of hand, even in an area where they're catering more and more to the criminal. They're just trying to run a successful small business, and they shouldn't be confronted with an armed robber as soon as they open their truck, within an hour of opening up, again, ahead of the lunch hour.
Derek Howard, one of the owners, was on his way to help his mother and uncle who were manning the truck. Before he could get there, things turned deadly.
Did she keep a gun on her just out of fear that something like this might happen?
Correct. 9 days you have to. Look, that's how it's bad.
Now look, these are the victimized, aggrieved people, but I just want to point out, I could barely understand what this guy said. I believe he said, correct, nowadays you have to, it's bad, but that went by super fast, and I think the local news would do us all a service by subtitling him going forward.
Houston police say around 1 o'clock this afternoon, a 23-year-old man pulled up next to the truck on Main Street near Fondren. He asked Howard's mother and uncle what kind of food they served. When they told him, he pulled out a gun.
So first of all, him asking what type of food that they served is obviously a red flag and something that you should watch out for, especially considering that food trucks often display images or very clear about the type of food that they serve, as they intend on drawing you in from far away. On top of that, as soon as I heard the woman in the open say that she just was cooking the recipes that she would normally feed to her family and serving it to people, I knew for a fact that they were cooking some variety of Southern fried food or Southern soul food, depending on what you want to call it. I know there's distinctions, but they're often similar and they often overlap. And by the way, when I went to go look up what was on the menu, unsurprisingly, that was exactly what was on the menu, because we're talking about a home cooking kind of thing from an elderly black woman in the South. It's not that hard to figure out. The only other potential option, if this was run by a black male, in my opinion, would be a Texas barbecue style food truck. That's just my opinion. You could call me for making the assumptions, but the facts are what they are, and I present you the menu. It is available on the internet, linked in the description.
Howard's uncle shut the window to the food truck. Police say the 23-year-old got out of his car, opened the window, put his gun inside, and fired, but it jammed. Howard's mother pulled out a gun of her own and shot the robber.
So this is where the story gets 100% serious, because you have a guy pulls up, asks what kind of food that they serve. This is meant to draw out the people so he could see who's actually in the truck. Then he pulls out a gun, demands money. They close the window to the truck, but then he gets out of the car, opens the window, sticks his arm in, and starts pulling the trigger, intending to just fire blindly into this truck, not caring who he kills. Now, as I said in the open, they had only been open for an hour at this point, meaning that his take that he was going to get was $40. $40 he was willing to kill two people, a family business, one of them a grandmother, one of them an uncle to this family, all working together trying to do the right thing, and that's the level of scumbaggery that we're dealing with. But luckily, the gun does not fire.
Thank God, because she's a godly woman. That's why that gun jammed, because God jammed it. Because when she opened that window, he could have shot her, but it jammed.
I'm assuming it might be more down to the guy having poor firearm capabilities, poor firearm maintenance, for the reason why the gun jammed. But regardless, I'm not going to take anything away from these people who lucked out, who did not find themselves in a deadly encounter. And this gave the grandmother, who's the mother of the young man that you see right there, the opportunity to draw her firearm, and she fired upon the suspect, who again was only a matter of minutes away from figuring out a way to unjam his gun and take the lives of these two individuals just for $40.
The robber, only described as a 23-year-old man, died in the parking lot. Police called this a self-defense shooting. No one is in custody. Howard's mother was taken to the hospital because she had a panic attack.
Now look, the suspect ends up being killed at the scene. Don't try to rob people of their food truck in Houston. Obviously, this was a completely defensible shooting. Because of the laws in Houston, it's not even a question. Honestly, in most states, when you present a firearm, that clearly and obviously presents a deadly threat, and thus this is a defensible position. However, I do feel really bad for the grandmother who had to take a life and was so distraught in the moment that she ended up having a panic attack, because again, people have firearms to defend themselves in case the worst case scenario happens. They don't want to actually take another life. I'm sure it hurt this woman a lot to kill a 23-year-old. Spoiler alert, he's definitely a black dude. We're talking about Houston, and the local news is not describing him by race. That looks like he might be similar in age to her own son. So, but for this woman and this family doing something good and honorable and reasonable and solid, as in start their own business, becoming entrepreneurial, serving their community, a young black man, no father is mentioned by the way in this story, could have likely been in this scenario. So this is a horrible thing for her. However, obviously the criminal winning would be more horrible, but my heart goes out to her. And again, I will say this, when you find good, decent people who react to horrible situations and defend themselves, I think it's important to support them. So I'm going to do the links and all that so you guys can go to the food truck, try their food. I'm sure it's delicious, honestly. The fact that they only have $40 in the register is not a measure of the quality of the food. I'm absolutely certain. By the way, I've been looking at the reviews of this place. It's largely due to the fact that they just opened up an hour before, because again, this was before the lunch rush.
He says all of this was over only $40. That's all they had made today.
People need to get a job and stop stop trying to rob people, because some people are trying to make an honest living.
But to all the people who say that the Second Amendment is white supremacy and it's somehow connected to slavery and it's all about evil white racism, I will point out that most homicide in this country happens in black areas with black perpetrators and black victims. So defensive uses of firearms, I would expect to be disproportionately done by black Americans, just like this scenario. This woman obviously was doing nothing wrong. She was confronted with a deadly threat. They even tried to flee the scenario or cut themselves off from the scenario by closing the window, which is a totally unnecessary step in the city of Houston, in the state of Texas, but they did it anyway. And I'm glad that there's not even a question about whether or not there'll be criminal charges filed against these people, because what this guy was clearly doing was trying to murder them for the money in their register. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a defensive use of firearms in Houston. Till next time.